Recently, the FDA authorized for emergency use a booster dose of the Pfizer-BioNTech mRNA vaccine. Now, it applies to only those people who received the Pfizer vaccine in the first place, not to those who received either the Moderna vaccines or the J&J vaccine. So you might be wondering, if you happen to be in those groups, when a booster dose for the Moderna or a booster dose for J&J vaccine would be available. It's a very good question. Hello everyone, I'm Naveen Agarwal and welcome to my weekly video update. Well, good news. Just last week, FDA and Moderna, they presented their data about safety and effectiveness of a booster dose to an independent committee. That committee is a panel of independent experts, and they review this information as the first step, and based on their recommendation, FDA can issue an EUA. So this is part of the process, and I sat through those presentations, day-long presentations, a lot of information, a lot of discussion, a lot of questions. But the good news is that at the end of the day, they unanimously recommended to the FDA that the Moderna booster dose EUA be granted to them. So it's going to happen soon. There's still some more work left, but it is coming, just like the Pfizer-BioNTech booster was authorized, and it's available now to some people. By the way, I have a video about the Pfizer-BioNTech booster dose and who is eligible on my YouTube channel. You can look that up. In the same session, the next day, in the same meeting, the next day, they also authorized the J&J booster. So I'll be talking about that in the very near future in another video. But before we go into some of these details about the Moderna booster, let's take a step back and ask the question, why are we even having a conversation about booster shots? Right? We are still not out of it, right? We know that COVID-19 is still quite prevalent. We have new variants like the Delta variant. Many parts of our country are still high rates of transmission, so it's far from over. So there is still a need, especially because we are now aware that we know that the vaccine effectiveness is very high against severe COVID-19 disease, but not as much. And we know some data is emerging that the effectiveness against mild to moderate disease with symptoms may be going down. And we already know that the antibody levels are going down. So there's a concern that this may be just the first step towards losing effectiveness against even severe disease. So people are concerned at a general community population level. Now, every individual is different, and I always say you should discuss your special situation with your doctor before you make any decisions. But as a whole, that's why we are having a conversation about boosters, because if the effectiveness is going down, we have to somehow bring it back up. And that's what they're trying to do by authorizing for emergency use these different booster options for different people. You might have heard about mix and match, right? Could a Pfizer, and please share in your comments below what you think about that. Could someone who received the Pfizer vaccine get a Moderna booster or a J&J booster, or someone who received J&J vaccine could have a Moderna or a Pfizer booster? Many other countries have tried that, and there is good information out there. So share with me in your comments below what are your thoughts about mix and match boosters. But boosters are in general becoming a pretty important topic of discussion. So that's a background. And against that background, I want to share with you some key points about the Moderna booster that just got authorized for, or just going to be authorized. They have just made the recommendation so far, but FDA has to do that, but that usually happens. So the EUA for Moderna booster is going to be here pretty soon. So we'll look into that. We'll also briefly look at who will be eligible, likely, based on what we know from the Pfizer-BioNTech booster eligibility. We will discuss that. And then we'll come back and have some general discussion about what it means or what it does not mean, most importantly, and how you should look at this information to figure out what your next step should be. So let's look into this. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is how they look at booster dose effectiveness, whether it's working or not. So they do something called immunogenicity bridging study, and they look at the change in the level of antibody. Keep in mind that they look at data from on the same people. So they had people in their phase 3 clinical trial who received the first 2 doses, and they had their neutralizing antibody levels 28 days after dose 2. These same people received a booster dose, and there were about 170 or so that are included in this particular set. They received a booster 6 months after receiving their dose 2, and they want to look at their antibody level, neutralizing antibody level, 28 days. So they can do comparison, side-by-side comparison. What was the neutralizing antibody 28 days after dose 2? And what's the neutralizing antibody level 28 days after receiving a booster? First key point to note is that the booster dose is only half the amount of mRNA. In the original 2 doses, 100 micrograms, but here only 50 micrograms. We'll talk about that in just a minute. So they are comparing results, antibody levels, 28 days after booster versus 28 days after dose 2 in the same individuals. Here's a reference, and I'll give that to you as part of this video presentation. You will find the link to FDA page where they have a lot of details that you can look into. So bottom line, they want to look at the change in the antibody level. So what did they find? They found that after receiving the booster, the number was 1800 compared 28 days after. In the same individuals, this is on average. Okay, here is a 95% confidence interval. So it ranged from 1500 to 2000 or 2100. In the same individuals, on average, it was only about 1000. So it's a jump of 1.8, ratio of 1.8. And they do a lot of statistical analysis, which is what they describe here. And that shows it's statistically meeting their acceptance criteria. They accept it. Now, having said that, they also did other analysis that did not pass their requirement. Okay, but as I told you before, the end result was it has been authorized. So they look at a lot of data. They don't make a decision based on only one data point or one type of analysis. They look at as a whole, and they look at benefit risk analysis as a whole. And as a whole, they have decided that yes, giving a booster dose at half the level of the first 2 doses is effective, or is likely going to be effective in keeping our vaccine efficacy at a high level. Briefly mention safety. They looked at a lot of safety data, and their conclusion was that there is no new additional safety risk with the booster compared to the 2 doses, that the safety data that was analyzed as part of the EUA. There were some symptoms that were reported as slightly higher frequency, some swelling in the arm, some local area reaction, but overall, in general, the safety profile seems to be similar, and there are no new safety concerns for them to believe that the safety risk has actually gone up because you're going to give a booster. So the bottom line here is that they are demonstrating effectiveness. Safety risk profile is about the same as before. So yes, that's justification for authorizing or recommending to authorize a booster dose at half the level. So point number 2, who is covered by this EUA? This is very similar to what was proposed for the Pfizer-BioNTech booster. People 65 years of age or older, 18 to 64 years old at high risk of severe COVID-19, and 18 to 64 years old who are at high risk due to exposure in their jobs. Now, more detailed policy will come out of the CDC's committee about exactly who will be involved, but my expectation is that it will be similar to what they have outlined for the Pfizer-BioNTech booster. So in summary, the data is showing effectiveness of the booster in terms of higher antibody levels compared to their baseline, and there are no new safety risks, and the eligibility criteria are going to be pretty much the same. So share with me your thoughts. What do you think? If you were on that committee, would you have made the same recommendation, or would you have other questions, other concerns? If you received the Moderna vaccines earlier, would you be willing to take this booster in the future? Even though you may not qualify right now, maybe in the future, if it becomes open to everybody, would you be willing to take this booster? Please share in your comments below. Now, let me come back to why this is only half the dose for the booster, not the 100 microgram mRNA for the first 2 doses that were originally authorized. So what they are demonstrating that even at half the dose, the increase is significant, the increase in the antibody levels. So it offers many advantages, like you don't have to use as much vaccine. So it can be made available to a lot more people, even in the US and outside the US. We know that there is still a vaccine shortage all over the world, and we have to fight this battle together. Second, by reducing the amount of mRNA, you are naturally going to reduce the overall risk, even though the data shows it's about the same. But why introduce more than what is necessary? I think that's the key point. And the data shows that even at half the dose, it seems to have effectiveness. So that's the reason. It's great news. It's great news that even 50 microgram, half the dose is still working. So I see this as good news. Moving forward, more options for people at an individual level and for people at public health policy level to continue to fight this battle against COVID-19. But share your thoughts below in the comments section. What are top of mind for you? Do you think boosters are important? Are they necessary? Would you take it if it became available to you? And as I said before, I will be talking about the J&J booster conversation that happened in the same sessions, and that information is out there as well in my next video. I look forward to hearing from you. I hope all of you are continuing to stay safe, and I want to thank you for your continued interest and attention.